Hello everyone, my name's Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX05, and EX5 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the supposed number one deck coming out of EX5, and that is going to be about Anubismon. So before I get into the actual strategy of what the deck is trying to do, there is one thing that we're going to have to note, and that is the fact that Anubismon eventually is going to get limited. This isn't going to take place until March 1st, which is going to be in BT15, so we do have all of EX5 to be able to play with Anubismon at full power. So this limitation on Anubismon himself is basically going to kill off the deck as is. Sure, you could kind of take his core or shell and try to adapt the deck to be able to work without him, but it's not necessarily going to be the same because of how strong Anubismon is as a card. But at least we do have the shell that he's working with, on top of the fact that, well, Anubismon is still technically going to be legal. He's just going to be a good Tech 1 card in some other purple decks. But what the deck is trying to do is be a swarm-based deck. So the deck is utilizing lots of draw and discard based synergies to filter through its deck as quickly as it possibly can, set its trash up at the same time, and to gain resources for discarding because of course it's purple, that's kind of just what purple does, and it also is going to be playing Digimon by card effects, and that's essentially what Nubis is in a nutshell. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing your classic stack-based deck thing where you're going to hide your main stack in raising and move out to make your big combo plays while setting up in the back your training cards and memory boosts to try to dig through the deck to find exactly what you need, so that way you can make one really big powerful push turn when you move out, and then when you move out, that's when you're going to be doing all of this drawing and discarding, gaining a whole bunch of resources, and spawning extra bodies, putting your opponent in a very difficult position based on the type of a board state that you can make, just because you could use it both offensively and defensively. The biggest weakness of the deck, of course, is the fact that it is, well, a stack-based deck, and it does come with some minor inconsistencies at times, on top of a couple of bad matchups and floodgates that could potentially stop and stall out what the deck is trying to do. But outside of that, it really doesn't have too many weaknesses, which is why it is one of the strongest decks currently in Digimon. So, with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digi-Eggs, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Sunomon from BT6 as my main egg. You also could run 1 copy of Xiaomon if you really wanted to, or you could even flip-flop and swap the ratios, allowing us to draw extra cards when we need to. Sunomon just draws us cards when we're discarding cards, which is something that the deck is already doing, and Xiaomon is drawing us cards when we play Digimon by card effect, which again is something the deck is already doing, so it's just what you're doing on when, and how you're going to want to draw that card. Next, on to the level 3s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Ignitemon. So Ignitemon is just a really powerful card, mostly for its inheritable ability to help us gain some extra resources when we're playing Digimon by card effects, which of course we're doing because that's one of the main goals on what the deck is trying to do. Then it also has a nice control aspect to the card as well. For when we're attacking with this card, we could delete another Digimon to be able to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with the same level or less than the Digimon we just deleted, so that way we could remove potential problems depending on what we're able to spawn and what we want to delete. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Goblimon. So Goblimon is kind of a filler slot as long as you're utilizing the inheritable ability to be able to gain memory in some way, shape, or form. Goblimon is just one of the better cards at doing this just because it's interacting with us trashing cards. So when we're discarding our cards due to our card effects, that's how we're going to be gaining the memory, which we're going to be doing when we're climbing up our stages to try to make Digivolving as efficient as we possibly can. And then the last 4 rookie slots could really be whatever you feel like you want it to be. I'm just going to be dedicating it to Floodgates because, well, we're in purple and we could revive and reuse our Floodgates. So I'm running 2 copies of Gazimon to stop the opponent from being able to gain memory, and I'm also going to be running Psychmon, which we do have to be a little bit careful of, but it's not that bad just because we have ways to get rid of it ourselves, where players just can't reduce play cost of cards. And then we also have more level 3s that we're going to be utilizing, mostly just 1 copy of Spadamon as a really good tech card to be able to use in combination with Mervamon, just because Mervamon is a cross-heart traded Digimon and she could revive Spadamon, as well as Spadamon being basically a good discard card that we want to throw away because he's going to be useful almost nowhere else other than our trash, and when he's played, by shoving himself underneath a cross-heart traded Digimon, we get a de-digivolve one of the opponent's Digimon by 1, which is really nice on being able to have alternative ways to remove and deal with potential threats. And then on top of that, his when attacking ability isn't that bad either, just because we are still playing with a couple of cross-hearts traded cards, not too many, but he still is nice at being able to make sure we could try to have extra ways at finding those cards. And then when it comes to the level 4s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Doberman X Antibody. So Doberman X Antibody is a really solid card just because its inheritable ability is something we've already seen before, and that's going to be a reoccurring trend with a lot of our low-end Digimon, is the ability to try to help us gain additional memory and tempo or resources depending on the action that we're going to be taking, and this triggers when we're going to be playing our Digimon by card effects, which is what we're going to do on our higher stages, so that way we have alternative ways at gaining that memory to make our plays as cheap and efficient as we possibly can. Then Doberman also is a really decent card because he has an on-play ability that gives one of our Digimon retaliation until the end of the opponent's turn, which is really annoying to deal with just because it's an extra form of removal that the opponent is going to have to think about on how they're going to interact with it. Then on top of that, when we're digivolving up into this card, it's just going to help us cycle through our deck because we get to draw 1 card and then discard 1 card from our hand, and if we have Doberman or the X Antibody option in its inheritable sources, then we also get to activate its on-play ability as part of its when digivolving ability. You could line up the deck to actually utilize this, but most of the time we're just using it for that cycling ability when we're digivolving up and its inheritable ability. And that's kind of why I'm also running 3 copies of Ogremon, just because it's an extra way to be able to gain some more resources. So during our turn, while this card is just sitting passively on the field, when one of our effect trashes a card from our hand, which we have plenty of abilities to do so, then we get to gain 1 memory, with an inheritable ability of also gaining us a memory when we discard a card by our card effects. So this is just Resource Engine the card, which makes him really good at being as tempo efficient as we possibly can. And then the last card is going to be 3 copies of the brand new promo Saberdramon. So Saberdramon has Raid and Retaliation built in, making it a really powerful form of removal. And then the inheritable ability is also pretty decent, allowing us to be able to return a purple or red Digimon from our trash to our hand, allowing us to reuse whatever piece we feel like we need to grab back when our higher stage Digimon is getting deleted. Next, on to the level 5s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Blue Marimon. So Blue Marimon has Retaliation native to him, which may or may not matter depending on how we're going to be utilizing the card, but the most important thing about this card is the fact that it does have a nice when digivolving ability to allow us to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. So as we're digivolving up, ideally we're going to try to cycle through our deck, so that way we could try to draw into more pieces that we would want or need, while setting up our trash with everything that we need in there in order to make our cards as effective as we possibly can. And the fact that we're going to be discarding cards means that with all of our different inheritable abilities that interact with discarding, then we're going to be gaining resources for discarding cards. Then he also has a nice all turns inheritable ability for when we're playing Digimon by card effects. We also get to gain a memory, also being a resource engine in of himself. And that's why I'm also going to run 2 copies of the BT3 Lady Devimon, just because she's doing almost the exact same thing as what Blue Marimon is doing when we digivolve up into her, where we're just drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards, which is still just a lot of cards to see, and we want that consistency on that ability to set up. Then what she's doing a little bit different is the fact that when we use an option as her inheritable ability, we get to delete one of the opponent's low-level Digimon, which we are running a decent amount of options, mostly going to be the memory boosts and wisdom training cards, to be able to interact with this ability. And then the last level 5 of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Maycrackmon Vicious Mode. So Maycrackmon Vicious Mode has a pretty decent amount of variety on how we could utilize her card, gaining the ability whether we're hard playing her off of ideally reviving her or playing her from our hand just because we're desperate and we need to, or if we digivolve up into her, which we're not trying to do more often than not just because she is more expensive than some of the other cards digivolving into her. But regardless, the ability that we're going to be gaining is the fact that we could discard a card from our hand, which is something we already like, and if we discarded a purple card, we get to delete one of the opponent's level 3 Digimon, allowing us to be able to snipe pesky floodgates, on top of the fact that if we also discarded a yellow card, we also get to have one of the opponent's Digimon gain minus 3000 DP, but she's just in here for that extra control and another body that we want to try to spawn off of our high-level Digimon. Next, on to the level 6s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of the main boss monster of the deck, Anubismon himself. So this card is absolutely cracked on how strong he is at being able to create a board presence, just because when we digivolve up into him, we get to trash up to 3 cards from our hand, which is something we already want, just because that's going to help us gain some extra resources in case we didn't utilize any of our discard-based synergies. Then we also get to play a purple Digimon from our trash and have its play cost to be reduced by 3. And then for each card we've already trashed, we get to further reduce the play cost of the card by 1. So if we're ideally discarding all 3 cards, we're going to be able to reduce the play cost of any purple Digimon we're going to play from our trash by 6, which is quite a lot because we could pair that up with specific abilities to further reduce them even more. But the cool thing about this ability is the fact that you don't only get this when you digivolve into this card, we get this on every one of our main phases as well, so the longer Anubismon sticks around, the more threatening of a card he could be at being able to spawn and respawn our Digimon efficiently. Then, on top of that, he also has a secondary ability, because of course he does, where when an effect plays one of our Digimon, which we're doing off of his ability, we get to delete one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon, and if this effect didn't delete anything, then we get to draw a card. So he's either killing something or helping us draw cards back, which is still really, really powerful nonetheless. And then the only other level 6 that the deck really needs, you could run more if you wanted to, as long as they have decent on-play effects. Mervamon is the best card to pair up with Anubismon, because Anubismon, as we already established, is going to reduce the play cost of whatever purple card we're trying to play from our trash. So we're trying to have Mervamon be in our trash, and we could then utilize the Digicross ability in combination with his play cost reduction to basically play out her for 2 instead of the 11 that we normally would play her out for. So that's what makes this card really strong in combination with Anubismon, and she also has some pretty decent flexibility on how we could use her, having both an on-play and when digivolving ability to be able to play out a level 4 or lower purple Digimon or Digimon with cross hearts in its traits from our trash for free, and if we digicrossed, then we get to increase the number of cards we could play by 1. So just utilizing Anubismon to spawn Mervamon, Mervamon is going to spawn another body or potentially 2, depending on if we digicrossed with her or not, and you could kind of start to see the snowball effect on how powerful of a board state we can make. But what Mervamon is also doing is making that board states that we're making even more powerful because of her interaction with the retaliation ability, where during all turns, all of your Digimon with retaliation also gain rush and blocker, so it's making our retaliation Digimon into blockers, and if we're able to have enough memory to keep turn, then we could even attack with them right away for even more potential damage. And then when it comes to the level 6s, I'm just going to be running 2 copies of Shine Greymon Ruin Mode. So Shine Greymon Ruin Mode is just something to do with our level 6s, more specifically our Mervamon, when we're done utilizing it for the turn, and we're just trying to look for alternative ways to stall out the opponent to try to capitalize on Anubismon even more, and Shine Greymon is just one of, if not the best card to do so with, because when we Digivolve up into him, and when he is deleted, we get to have a nice minus 5,000 DP on all of the opponent's Digimon that lasts until their next turn. So this makes it very hard for the opponents to play under this debuff, just because we could stack it with itself because it's not limited to once per turn, and again, if we have enough memory to utilize it, then we could swing with this card and it's going to be able to delete itself, because at the end of the attack, we get to delete this Digimon and one of the opponent's Digimon. We also get to recover, and we get to then, if we have a Tamer in play, hatch another Digi-Egg into an empty space in our raising area, which if you want, you could run a Tamer. The deck doesn't really need one, but it's still something insanely powerful to think about doing, on top of being a 2-color Digimon, being in purple and yellow for Maycrackmon to be able to discard for more benefit. Or if you really wanted to, you don't necessarily have to run Shine Greymon Ruin Mode, but I would recommend running Death X instead, just because Death X is another insanely powerful card that Anubismon can take advantage of, just because Anubismon's already reducing the play cost of whatever we're playing, and Death Xmon is also further reducing the play cost even more, so we could even potentially use Anubismon to spawn a level 7 for free. And as I already mentioned before, the deck doesn't really have a whole lot of space for Tamers, but if you wanted to run one, there's a couple of different ones that you can choose from. I think that Starter Deck Matt from Starter Deck 16 is definitely one of the better ones, being a decent memory setter that's interacting with our discard-based synergies. So instead of using a Tamer to try to generate extra resources, I'm instead opting to use a combination of training cards and memory boosts. So they're both doing almost the exact same thing on trying to dig out specific cards while having a delay ability to be able to increase our overall tempo and momentum. They're just doing things a little bit differently. So that's kind of why we're going to be trying to hide our main stack in our raising area, either on our level 3 or our level 4, depending on what our level 4 is. And we're going to be just popping a combination of memory boosts and wisdom training to be able to make our evolution as cheap as we possibly can, on top of the inheritables gaining us some extra tempo and momentum as well. So you can see why we would just want to utilize these cards to just sit and chill and wait until we're able to strike when the opportunity best suits us. And then the only other option card is a tech or flex spot. It doesn't necessarily have to be Calling from the Darkness, but because Calling from the Darkness is limited to 1, I figured it's still just a really good card to use, because it allows us to be able to return up to 2 purple Digimon from our trash to our hand. We're going to be using this mostly on an empty field, so that way we don't have to delete a Digimon, but if we do have a Digimon on our fields, then we could forcibly delete it ourselves to be able to try to trigger on delete abilities that way if we're going to be playing with any. But that's pretty much it for the main deck. You could kind of see the full deck breakdown, and you could take a look at all of the different synergies in place in order to try to make Anubismon and Mervamon as strong as we possibly can. So we have Anubismon and Mervamon both being shamans. Mervamon is playing with Crosshearts, which we have Spadamon, Ignite, and herself as Crosshearts to be able to use. Mervamon's also playing with Retaliation, which Dobermon, X, and Sabretramon also have Retaliation, on top of Blue Marimon. So there's just a lot of moving parts and pieces in order to make this deck work, all centered around reviving Digimon and discarding cards as the main way to be able to facilitate what the deck is trying to do. And then we do have other useful cards that we could even think about having more flexibility inside of the deck, depending on the type of abilities that you're going to try to prioritize. But those core mechanics around retaliation, revival, and discard are going to be the main ones that you're going to want to focus on. And we do have lots of different ways to be able to help facilitate that in the color purple, as well as some other really decent level 6 Digimon that we could play around with it as a good revive target, because they have some really strong on-play abilities. Unfortunately for the deck, as I already mentioned at the beginning of the video, Anubismon is eventually going to get limited, so in terms of some future upgrades, well, there really isn't going to be any, and it's going to be up to you, the player, to be able to adapt the deck without Anubismon based on the tools that we have and the potential tools we would be getting in the future.